Buking kayo ngayon mga miyembro ng Hamas, tauhan pala ng ospital at UN.
Every number from the so-called Ministry of Health is Hamas. Many UNRWA workers in Gaza are themselves members of Hamas. The time has come to bust the myth of UN-supplied facts.
Ang United Nations Security Council noong Biyernes ay nakarinig ng incendiary remarks mula sa pinuno ng ahensyang pangkalusugan ng UN sa isang talakayan sa patuloy na krisis sa Israel at Palestine. Sinabi ng Director General ng WHO na ang buong sistema ng kalusugan ng Gaza ay gumuho na ngayon. Gayunpaman, inakusahan ni Israel Ambassador at Permanent Representative sa Israel Gilad Erdan ang mga opisyal ng UN na hindi sumailalim sa realidad ng sitwasyon at inakusahan ang ilang opisyal ng pagpapagana ng terorismo sa Gaza. Ayon kay Erdan, mas naniniwala ang WHO at UNRWA sa mga pahayag ng Hamas kaysa sa Israel. Sa kabila ng mga ebidensya at paliwanag na inilabas ng Israel, sinabi rin ni Erdan na halos lahat ng empleyado ng Health Ministry sa Gaza Strip ay mga miyembro ng Hamas. Gayon din ang mga nagtatrabaho para sa UNRWA. Ang UNRWA ay kumakatawan sa United Nations Relief and Works Agency para sa Palestine refugees sa malapit na silangan, isang ahensya ng United Nations na itinatag ng General Assembly noong 1949 na may mandatong magbigay ng makataong tulong at proteksyon sa mga rehistradong Palestine refugee, kasama sa mga operasyon ng West Bank, East Jerusalem at Gaza Strip, Jordan, Lebanon at maging ang Syria. Ang UNRWA ay halos lahat pinondohan ng mga voluntaryong kontribusyon mula sa mga miyembrong estado ng United Nations, kabilang ang gobyerno ng US.
I would like to thank you for your consideration in permitting me to address the Council earlier in light of the Sabbath. No Jew will ever forget the Sabbath of October 7th. Another traumatic atrocity was burned into the Jewish people's history. Still has not condemned Hamas's heinous planned massacre of Israeli civilians. I doubt that the response would be much different. Council members, today's briefing focuses on the targeting of hospitals. Hamas's intentional targeting of hospitals is a war crime. Deliberate attacks on medical facilities, paramedics and ambulances sent to treat the wounded were rampant during the Hamas slaughter. I urge the Council to invite me to share a screening of the footage from Hamas's slaughter. Once you see the barbarity and savagery with your own eyes, you will understand the evil that Israel is defending itself against. Will you condemn Hamas for murdering Israeli medical personnel? Will you call out Hamas for torching Israeli ambulances? Will you call out Hamas for indiscriminately firing rockets at Israeli hospitals? After all, this has been Hamas's modus operandi for years. What about Hamas's exploitation of hospitals, ambulances, and medical clinics for terror? Will this be raised in today's meeting? That the Hamas Nazis' main command headquarters is located within and under Shifa Hospital. Existing tunnels adjacent to and underneath hospitals. We have shown videos of Hamas ISIS using ambulances, of transporting weapons and terrorists. We have shared intelligence, including phone calls between terrorists, but that they also control the fuel supply to medical centers. We have shared footage of Hamas terrorists who openly admit that Shifa Hospital and other hospitals and that ambulances are used as taxis for terrorists. Over the past 16 years, Hamas has turned every inch of Gaza into a terror trap. Every medical worker, doctor, and patient in Gaza is a human shield for the Hamas terrorists. It is a war crime of epic proportions. Will this be the focus of today's meeting? How can we possibly hold a briefing on the medical situation in Gaza? For weeks, Israel has asked all civilians to temporarily evacuate northern Gaza. designated corridors for civilians to evacuate south. Israel is providing safe passage for Gazan civilians to leave. Gazan civilians were waving white flags as they tried to leave Al-Nasser hospital. Yet, they were forced to stay after Hamas opened fire on them. Israel is at war with Hamas, and we have gone above and beyond to mitigate civilian casualties. For Israel, life is sacred. But yet, for Hamas, death is sacred, particularly civilian deaths. Would this council condemn Hamas for these crimes? Israel formed a task force to establish field hospitals in southern Gaza. This team is in touch with countries around the world. There is no clearer proof that Israel is doing everything possible to provide solutions to mitigate civilian harm. Israel is fighting a war that it did not start or want. Yet, Hamas violated that ceasefire with the brutal slaughter, rape, and burning of 1,400 Israelis. Hamas is fully responsible for the situation in Gaza. They are fully responsible for Gaza's resources. While Hamas must be held fully accountable, there is another body, sadly, the UN. Colleagues, for years I have warned this council of the briefings you receive, statistics and events that are provided to this council by UN officials, such as Dr. Tedros, such as Mr. Lazzarini of UNRWA, such as Mr. Griffith of OCHA, and also, sadly, from the Secretary General himself. Yes, diplomatic niceties require us to thank them for their work, but sadly, they are relaying falsehoods that are completely detached from reality. WHO is it that supplies the UN with these so-called facts. Who is it that supplies the UN with these so-called facts? Is this information coming from unbiased and impartial third parties? Every piece of information regarding the situation on the ground that this council receives comes from Hamas, not international UN employees in Gaza. I will remind the Council that Hamas, a genocidal terror organization, controls every facet of Gaza. Every number from the so-called Ministry of Health is Hamas. Many UNRWA workers in Gaza are themselves members of Hamas. The time has come to bust the myth of UN-supplied facts. This council is being spoon-fed lies. Hamas has ensured that every square meter of Gaza is under their complete reign of terror. Local contributors to international media are Hamas members. We saw this week that innocent photojournalists for Reuters and the New York Times not only documented Hamas's horrors, crossed into Israel to film them with the terrorists themselves. And Hamas also rules all of the information coming out of the Strip. Hamas knows that this council ingests their poisonous falsehoods. This information is passed on to UN officials, and then this information is used to brief you. Hospital, the Hamas Ministry of Health immediately reported 500 fatalities. The WHO representative for Gaza has until today refused to be briefed by Israel. Instead, Dr. Peppercorn and WHO prefer to parrot Hamas lies. Tragically, the UN mechanisms have become terror enablers. We must no longer accept this. Solutions for Gazan civilians. This should be the focus of this meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Kaalam, ano ang masasabi mo sa ating nakamamahang topic ngayon? Antayin ko ang sagot mo sa comment section. Huwag mong kalimutang i-like ang ating video at mag-subscribe ka na rin sa ating channel. At siguraduhin na panoorin ang next videos na siguradong magugustuhan mo. Ito ang inyong Kaalam na nagsasabing, knowledge has a beginning, but no end.